Maker. We are in 1 Samuel 13. Why don't you go ahead and turn over there? We're doing a character study today. We're going to look at King Saul. The Bible wasn't written to us, but it was written for us. I love the old law because we go back to it and we get to see so many examples of the nature of God, the nature of man. Many times we see ourselves in these individuals. Maybe not exactly like them, but sometimes parts of them. Like, for example, Saul is a guy that I see myself sometimes in his life, but I don't want him to define me. So I'm learning from this. When I was growing up, we would look at 1 Samuel 13 and 15, which we'll do today, because they were great passages that emphasized God's authority, which, by the way, is very much needed. Very much needed. In fact, yesterday, I'm not trying to embarrass my kiddos and I'm not naming them. It's something that happened in the moment. We dealt with it and we're past it. But just to illustrate, there was a moment where I said something very clear to one of the kiddos and they were lingering and they weren't following instructions and they were wanting to give an explanation as to why they weren't following instructions. And I had to say, stop. And I found myself in 1 Samuel 15, just stop talking. Because they were pulling a Saul. And this happens sometimes in the breaks home. I'm like, coincidentally, I'm kind of preaching about this thing. It's like when mom and dad say to do something, and we've articulated that clearly, there's discussions over. We just want you to follow that. There's nothing wrong with that message. But what I want to emphasize before we get into the text are our goal, right, is not just to do the thing and leave our hearts out of it. Our goal is to have the right heart towards God. And if the hearts are right, then we do the correct thing. It's a really simple point, but it's one that mankind has struggled with through the ages, and it's one that you and I struggle with from time to time. And so in God's wisdom, we gather together in times like this, and we remind each other of tendencies that we have. And that's what it's about. But as typical when we're getting in a study like this, I do want to catch you up, in case it's been a while since you've been in 1 Samuel, the context leading up to chapter 13. You have in chapter 8, Israel has rejected their God. This was sinful. God rebuked them for it. Matter of fact, we'll find out later on. I'm going to try to come forward and see if it doesn't make the... Okay, the speakers are good, no feedback. If I have to run back, I will. I've got to move and I got to see what I'm looking at here. They rejected God. God gave them a king in his wrath, and he warned them. He said, kings are going to take advantage of you, so I'm letting you know. This is how this is going to go down. In chapter 9, and this isn't an accident, I don't believe at all. God says, you wanted to be like the other nations. You're thinking fleshly, and I'm going to give you just what you're looking for. I mean, the king that I'll give you, on the surface, just what you want. Ladies joke and say, I think a guy that's tall, dark, and handsome. Well, that's Saul in a package. He was literally taller than any other man. He was more handsome, and hey, ladies, his dad was wealthy. Isn't that great? And so we're introduced to Saul, and his father's donkeys are missing, and he goes out to find the donkeys, and he'll come in contact with Samuel, who is told by God that Saul is going to be the guy, and so he's anointed. And what's interesting is Samuel talks about the situation in which God's help will be required. And he's already giving him instruction that when this occurs, he's going to wait in Gilgal for 7 days, and then Samuel will appear and make a sacrifice. Now, there's a lot of discussion, and it's not really worth our time to get into it, and I don't have the time, quite frankly. It looks like this is a foreshadowing of events that will happen maybe 20 years in the future. And if that's the case, it's interesting that it's already there right at the beginning of this anointing of Saul. And this is going to be the beginning of his downfall. They are going to proclaim him as king, And this young man is hiding among the baggage. He's kind of this timid, insecure Saul. But God anoints him. But then Saul has a win over the Ammonites. And this really encourages the people. And so they kind of regroup and kind of recommit themselves to Saul as king. That's chapter 11. And then chapter 12, we're going to see Samuel's farewell speech. And he's going to go through their history and God's mighty power, how he's delivered them. And he's going to point out that you have been a sinful, rebellious people. And I'm encouraging you, trust in the Lord, obey the Lord. And so we come to chapter 13. That's just catching us up, okay? I've titled this one, Saul's Unauthorized Sacrifice. Oh, I'm in 2 Samuel. That's not going to help me. 1 Samuel 13. So in the first few verses here, we're learning how Saul and Jonathan, they have 3,000 personal soldiers between the two, and they split them up. And Jonathan has a defeat over the Philistines. This encourages Saul. Maybe I need to move back. And what they do is they gather all the men together because they're going to wage war against the Philistines, okay? And so that we have verses 5 through 7. And what the Philistines do is they gather all their troops, and they're going to go to war. And now, 8 through 15, well, let me just read it. I want to remind everyone, Samuel had told Saul, you're going to meet me at Gilgal, and you're going to wait 7 days. Wait for me so I can make the appropriate sacrifices to the Lord. Well, it's go time. Saul's in Gilgal. The storm's brewing. The Philistines are gathered together. The Israelites are afraid, and some of them are running away. Verse 8, he waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him. So Saul said, bring the burnt offering here to me and the peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. As soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. And Samuel went out to meet him and greet him. Samuel said, what have you done? And Saul said, well, when I saw the people were scattering from me, and you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines had mustered at Michmash, I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I've not sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering. You like that? Oh, poor. It's like Aaron, I just threw in the gold, and now came this calf. And Samuel said to Saul, you've done foolishly. You've not kept the command of the Lord your God with which he commanded you. For then the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. And Samuel arose and went up from Gilgal, and the rest of the people went up after Saul to meet the army. They went up from Gilgal to Gibeah of Benjamin. I'm going to stop right there, because right now that's the point that's what's pertinent to this discussion. And I wanted to share this at some point. I don't know when. I've got a little note in my margins on my Bible, and it's concerning Samuel's rebuke and him losing the kingdom. And I have in here, God is very upset about it, more than meets the eye? ? And I'll put these little notes for me to go back later and to look more into. You know, you start to look at these accounts, and it seems pretty heavy. I'm reading about a God that is slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. We discussed that a lot. And here Saul is, and the kingdom's going to be ripped away from him. What do I do about this? I'm not trying to sound like a broken record, but at least in my mind, if there's something that I see I struggle with, or that brethren struggle with again and again, there's a reason why I keep bringing this up, because I have found that though we say we're okay with the character of God, we actually do struggle with God's judgment. So let me tell you right now, for sure, atheists would call me a Kool-Aid drinker. Because they would say, in your eyes, God just can't do wrong, can he? And I would say, that is absolutely right. I drink the Kool-Aid all day long, every day. Because I have come to the decision that what God does is true and it is good. And there may be something that I'm misunderstanding on my side. What I've also come to discover is that sometimes a shallow reading of a thing has left me with an inaccurate idea. Guys, we do need to, have you ever noticed, for example, in Leviticus 10, the unauthorized fire, and Nadab and Abihu are just cooked, but their brothers are not. Go and read it. There's 4 brothers. 2 of them are cooked, but all 4 did something incorrect. There's a context to it. Why is it in Acts chapter 5, Ananias and Sapphira are struck down dead for lying to God? Have you ever heard of anyone in the Bible lying to God? Are they always struck down dead? No, but there was a setting to that. It was a time in the history in the beginning of the church, and there was an example. Sometimes there's a setting of the thing. Brethren, Saul is the first anointed king of Israel. He is going to be God's right-hand man on the earth. And if Saul can't listen to God, if Saul's going to disrespect God, if Saul can't respect his authority, there's a trickle-down effect among his people. There's a problem with this. Oh, well, no, that doesn't always happen. You're king over God's people, and it's not your place to initiate sacrifices, by the way. We've got a system for this thing, and you weren't chosen for that. What I see in Saul, all these excuses. Well, I did what I needed to do due to the danger. I mean, the Philistines, the people are leaving. Oh, and by the way, you didn't show up on time. By the way, I don't think that he came like a day or two later. I think what's happening is that right at the beginning of the day, Saul was so antsy, and Samuel's not there, that he takes it upon himself to offer. By the way, there's 2. There's a burnt and a peace offering. He has one of them offered. I don't think he waited on Samuel. As soon as he offers it, Samuel shows up. I think that's the point, is that you're so antsy. You didn't wait on the Lord. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. But I'm going to do it on my timetable. I'm not going to do it on your timetable. I need you to listen to me. But he's got excuses. Another excuse, well, I just forced myself. Okay, so keep telling yourself that. But there's going to be people that are going to be reading this literature many years from now, and we're all going to chuckle whenever we read this. I forced myself. Okay, buddy. And here's Samuel's response. You've acted foolishly, and you've not obeyed God. Did you think that by disobeying God in your sacrifice, you would find favor with him? That doesn't seem to make sense. Saul, what are you doing? You lost your kingdom. And I mean, here it is. It's done. And now I've titled this one, Lessons from Saul, Stubborn Hearts, because these are narratives about hearts. And what he says is, the Lord has found someone after his own heart. Brethren, who is that? David. So we all know what's coming. Okay, I don't want to belabor the point. Let's move on. We have some victory, some fighting in chapter 14. We've got a rash vow from Saul. It's not important for today's study. But in Philistines, we've got a lot of battling with the Philistines. In chapter 15, what we're going to find is a confrontation with the Amalekites. And let me go ahead and just read this first portion to you. And Samuel said to Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people Israel. Now therefore listen to the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I have noted what Amalek did to Israel in opposing them on the way when they came up out of Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction all that they have. And this is intense. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel, and donkey. And guys, this is intense. And you read that correctly. Man, woman, baby, child, every animal. I remember what they did, and I think what's implied, because again, this is my belief. This is not just about some generation that's long gone and God's punishing. This is a people that chastise God's people and hurt them as they were trying to flee. And God remembered that, and these are still a rotten people. And it's time for God to execute judgment on them. He's going to do that by the hand of Saul. Saul is his sword. I want to note one thing, just as a side note, because these passages are intent. He says, I want you to devote them to destruction. And so that biblical language, the concept, is that when God asks someone to devote them to destruction, it's like a sacrifice. In other words, he says, I'm taking it all for myself. I'm taking man, woman, child, infant, and animal. You devote, so whenever you kill them, it is devoting it to me, almost like a sacrificial offering. I want it all. And so then what happens is he slaughters pretty much everybody, except for the king of the Amalekites, King Agag. And then what happens is that they save the best of the livestock. And what he's going to say is in order to offer it to God for a sacrifice, okay? And so allow me to read now the rest of this passage. It may have been a while since you've heard this, but here we go. Verse 10 of chapter 15. The word of the Lord came to Samuel. I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments. And Samuel was angry, and he cried to the Lord all night. See, there's something in between this text. Like we've got to, and so you read it, you go, what's going on? Samuel understood this. This was troubling to him. He's up all night over this thing. And Samuel rose early to meet Saul in the morning, and it was told Samuel, and can you imagine this? Samuel hears this. Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he has set up a monument for himself and turned and passed on and went down to Gilgal. The guy has the audacity, and he's blind. Remember we talked about self-awareness? He's so blind. He's so proud of himself for listening to God that he set up a monument for himself. And Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said to him, Blessed be you to the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord. And Samuel said, What then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears than the lowing of the oxen that I hear? Saul said, Well, they brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God, and the rest we have devoted to destruction. I don't know if I should make too much. He says it's twice, to your God. And I don't know if that's just the way it's translated or if there's something to that, but anyways, it's weird. Then Samuel said to Saul, Stop. This is what happened to me yesterday in our home. They were, well, stop. Cut it out. Stop talking with one of my little kiddos. Because they're going to this, Will, stop it. I'll tell you what the Lord said to me this night. And he said to him, Speak. Samuel said, Though you are little in your own eyes, or the other idea is that you were small whenever this started, is the idea. You are a nobody. You're the kid hiding in the luggage. Okay? Who are you? You're no one. And here's what God did for you. Made you the head of the tribes of Israel. The Lord anointed you king over Israel, and the Lord sent you on a mission and said, Go, devote to destruction the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed. Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you pounce on the spoil and do what is evil in the sight of the Lord? And Saul said to Samuel, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. I have gone on the mission on which the Lord sent me. I have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and I have devoted the Amalekites to destruction. But the people took of the spoil, sheep and oxen, the best of the things devoted to destruction, to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. And Samuel said, Has the Lord his great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices? Listen to this. Our country and our people, I'm not big. I don't like how everyone's always pointing at someone else. I'm big, like we need to look in the mirror. I think 80% of our time and our preaching and our teaching needs to be about looking in the mirror. But I'm going to look outside of the mirror. Our country needs to hear this right now. Our culture needs to hear this. Obey. Real simple. Obey. We're struggling with this stuff. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. Any parent in here chuckling? I just want you to listen to me, kid. I want you to stop talking for a moment. I want you to obey and listen. And we laugh about it when it's kids, but it's probably not funny when God says, yeah, but you're not a kid, you're a grown adult. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, which, by the way, Saul would break later on also. You remember that? Saul will end up actually finding a woman of divination. And he'll talk to Samuel again. Remember that? Isn't that funny? And presumption or stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. So here's the deal. At the beginning of this whole relationship, he wasn't happy about them asking for Saul, but he gave him Saul, and he also gave him a new heart. He was trying to help him, but he was not going to force him and take away his free will. So here we are. Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord. You know, I'm liking this, except for this last part, in your words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. My man, just admit your guilt. Now therefore, please pardon my sin and return with me that I may bow before the Lord. And Samuel said to Saul, I will not return with you, for you have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you from being king over Israel. As Samuel turned to go away, Saul seized the skirt of his robe, and it tore. Samuel said to him, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you this day and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you. And also, the glory of Israel will not lie or have regret, for he is not a man that he should have regret. Then he said, I have sinned, yet honor me now before the elders of the people and before Israel, and return with me that I may bow before the Lord your God. He wants a safe face in front of the people. So Samuel turned back after Saul, and Saul bowed before the Lord. And I can't help, man, I hope Saul did not go through with those sacrifices. And the crazy thing about Saul is that knowing him, I have no idea if he did. For all I know, he went ahead with it. I don't know. But he went back, bowed before the Lord. And then what Samuel does, he says, bring Agag, the king of the Amalekites. And Agag came to him cheerfully. Agag said, surely the bitterness of death is past. All right, I'm okay now. Samuel said, as your sword has made women childless, so shall your mother be childless among women. And Samuel hacked Agag to pieces before the Lord in Gilgal. This is a fun one for Sunday Bible class, isn't it, with the kiddos? Then Samuel went to Ramah, and Saul went up to his house in Gibeah of Saul, and Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death, but Samuel grieved over Saul, and the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. Brethren, when I'm preaching, I've got all these responsibilities, and I love to brag on you and to encourage and lift you up, and it is appropriate. But we cannot ignore passages like this. We cannot ignore the weight, like this is weighty, isn't it? It's God saying, I regret making you king. I found someone better than you. Samuel, I'm not going to look at him again. I'm hurting over him, but I'm not going to look at him again. God, brethren, this, you feel that. This is intense. Is this about authority? Yes, absolutely, there is authority in here. Absolutely. We need, and brethren, I'm sorry. I mean, it's all, matter of fact, I'll just share this with you. At this point, I don't need to go. It's the same excuse making. Matter of fact, I thought I'm going to put this up on a slide and look at the same basic excuses that Saul makes in both accounts. That's chapter 11 and chapter 13 and 15. They're essentially the same. Do you see that? And Samuel's rebuke is consistent. Authority has become like a bad word and a bad concept today. Now, it's unfortunate because people can abuse their authority, and that I sympathize with. I really do get that one. But we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Authority is a thing. And Saul was supposed to act that way because he had the Lord's name with him. By the way, just as a side note, if I may, some practical application. We don't have a king. We have Jesus, King Jesus. But I will say this as a side note, right? God has local fellowship, and who's your authority here? Elders. There are servant leaders. Yes, God bless them. We chose them because of their character, but they are leaders, and they have authority. They are to be respected. So how you talk to your shepherds, how you address them, how you respond to feedback, you don't talk to them like everyone else. Amen? You don't respond to them haphazardly and disrespectfully. Oh, why? Because they're so sensitive? No, because they're God's people. Chosen. It's authority. And the outsiders are supposed to look inside the church and see that we have divine order. And let me tell you, the reality is that whenever it's practiced correctly, people love it. Just as a side note, children, your parents have been given the authority by God in your home. And that's even different than the local body. So there's the church, and then there's the family unit, which is different than the church. Your father is over you, and he has authority. And sometimes he may explain something to you, and sometimes he may not. It matters not. You respect your father and your mother. That's the way it is. God has instituted the governing authorities. You may not like them. I don't like them, quite frankly, all the time. And I think we got issues. But the thing is from God, and I will respect them. I may not like a leader. I may not agree with his thoughts, his or her thoughts. It doesn't matter. But I'll tell you this, I'm going to respect them. You want to know why? Because God has told me to do this. So all that is right and it's good, and I didn't want to overlook that. But here's what I'm really saying. What's the difference between Saul and someone like David? Okay, I'm coming to a close now. I'm wrapping this up really quickly here. We've made the points. Here's because you're like, okay, so let me get this right. So Saul doesn't wait on the sacrifice and doesn't totally kill everybody. But David kills someone and sleeps with the guy's wife. And David's okay? Let me tell you the difference. Because David repented. Saul, by the way, actually tried to kill David several times, and the guy would never stop trying to kill him. Do y'all remember that? Saul had a different heart. Peter and Judas both denied Jesus. The difference with Peter is that when he repented and he regretted it, and by the way, Judas did too. Judas, I don't want to rob him completely. Judas felt bad and tried to give back the money. The problem is that he took himself out of the equation so he didn't have to deal with the shame of it. And Peter embraced the shame, and Jesus put him back to work. And David embraced the shame, and God put him back to work. Saul would not. He was a rebellious man. And so, it's real simple. My encouragement for us to continue the course, and I believe, brethren, while this is weighty, I'm not accusatory towards anyone. I'm speaking forcefully because this is a lesson that we're supposed to understand to our core. What you do says something about who you are. We don't have time to blame all of our actions on everyone else. Well, this person, well, this group, well, she said, well, he said, well, if only I would. No, stop it. Don't you wish we had a Samuel in our lives that would just say, stop talking right now? And just say, yeah, that was on me. Because, and here's where I'm going to leave you with a smile. Because your God is not looking to rip anything from you. He's not trying to rip a home from you. He's calling you into his presence for all eternity. When the man or woman says, God, I'm sorry for doing this thing because I did it without excuse. Will you forgive me? God is smiling back on us and saying, I've already forgiven you. And I know that this is the kind of person who you are, which is why you and I are going to be seeing a lot of each other. So I hope this was beneficial to you. Thank you for your attention. Let's stand and sing praises to God together.